All right, everyone. Hello again. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend and a relatively simple Monday and Tuesday. It has been I'm in Washington now, and what I can say is that it has been, for my Miami trained bones, been cold. Now, I recognize that the rest of you from more northern climes are laughing and saying, you silly thing, only in the 40s. When it's minus 40, it's cold. But again, my Miami trained bones are suffering from this. So if you see me going like this, I may or may not be happy about what you're saying. I may just be cold, okay? All right. So who can give me a very brief summary about what we talked about last time, the key points, the key takeaways, and describe some of the exercises we did and the challenges involved in those? Volunteers?
Well, it was mainly simultaneous, and we were doing the decollage, and we were. It was the simultaneous interpretation was a little bit too fast on the first one, and I was having trouble keeping up with her. But the second one with the Canadian person, he was a lot easier. I didn't have too much trouble on the exercises on my own afterwards. I was able to do that. And the important thing is to just keep focused and try to get as much behind as possible from the speaker, as much as possible, so that we can get the whole idea before we start simultaneous interpretation. And that made a lot of sense. It made a lot easier for me when doing my exercises. I was trying to wait as long as I could, and it sure helped me to retain a lot more by doing that.
Right. And, so did you? What other types of things? So we talk about décalage. What else which is that lag between the original and your actual production? What other types of techniques or challenges did we talk about on Tuesday? Excuse me, on Thursday.
Was that the day that we wrote the numbers and then we did the alphabet?
Yes.
Yes, I remember.
Okay. Yeah. Do you remember what the purpose of that was?
To concentrate on two things at one time. To be thinking about two things.
Right. Split attention. Yes, exactly. And we talked about one other thing that was sort of important. There were kind of three principles that we talked about. Does anybody remember what that was?
I believe it was about delivery.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, and it comes along with the P scale on elegance, economy, and precision.
Right. So what is at the bottom of the scale? What do we start with?
Precision.
Right. And then we advance to?
Economy, and then
we hope to get to elegance, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the P scale. Augustine's famous rule. Did you hear what you just said? We want to be listening to what we're saying. We want to be monitoring our own production as we are going along. And some of the exercises that we were working on were intended precisely for that, to sort of be able to track what we're doing, what we're saying, and practice doing that, even if it's just through what's called shadowing, repeating in English rather than attempting to interpret. All right. Today I want to do a little bit more of that, but I also want to talk about the fourth element, and that is reformulation. All right. So let me go ahead and start a screen share here. As we were saying just in passing on Thursday, there are issues with the concept of reformulation in court interpreting. The concept of reformulation is rather straightforward. It is taking what you hear and reworking it and putting it into other words, or changing the order of what you're hearing. You'll see this a lot with conference trained interpreters, not so much, you'll certainly see it in or hear it in simultaneous, but very often you'll see it and hear it in court when doing consecutive. If you have a very long consecutive, conference trained interpreters will take the last thing that we hear and put it first. Why? Because we tend to forget it. If we're going to leave anything hanging, we're going to take what we heard last, and if we can possibly do so, we're going to put it at the top and then follow everything else in a logical order.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, in court is extraordinarily problematic because that's not the order in which the deponent or the defendant or the witness said it. And in court, we need to be as faithful as possible to that order. So this is a technique that taking the last thing you heard and putting it first, so that you don't drop it. This is not something that I recommend at all for court interpreters because, again, you're working in the consecutive mode and the record has to be as clear as possible. But what about when we're working in the simultaneous mode? Well, we said last time that our courthouses currently are not recording the interpreter's rendition into our target language. So while we certainly can't add or omit anything, what happens if we rework something, if we use other words to not explain, but if we can't come up with the exact term, or if we use something that's more familiar to us to get the idea across? What do you guys think about that? Is that something that we should be doing, shouldn't be doing? Where do you see the issues lie? This is more on the ethics side rather than on the actual technique side.
I think the challenge would be having the word as close to the meaning as possible, and I think that's where it's going to be decided whether the interpreting is close, has the integrity of what was said. Exactly.
It is hard. You need to find words that are going to be absolutely as close as possible. To be able to reformulate something effectively, of course, we have to understand it. If we don't understand what we're hearing, we can't reformulate. What I'd like to do today, in the understanding that the technique of reformulation per se in our court work is not something that we're going to use a lot of, I still think that the active listening involved in reformulation, of drawing key ideas, and of being able to identify those things on the fly that are absolutely vital. You may remember last time we also were talking about, okay, what happens when somebody's going really fast? Or what happens when can I interrupt the judge? When can I interrupt and say the interpreter needs a repetition? And you may remember I said you don't want to do it all the time, but certainly if you miss the key element, like how long the sentence is, of course you want to interrupt and say, Your Honor, the interpreter needs a repetition. How do you know what that key thing is? Obviously, with something like a sentence, okay, you should be able to figure that out. That's self-evident. But what other things are there? How do you actively listen while you're interpreting? And how can you then identify what those core things are? So I'd like to use these reformulation exercises more focusing on that, on our ability to actively listen and to repeat things and to understand what we're hearing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I am going to play an audio, and I want you all to not take any notes whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. Okay? Please do not write anything down. I want you to listen, try to figure out what is going on, who is speaking, which should be relatively obvious, they'll identify themselves. What is the content of this hearing? It is a supervised release hearing. Supervised release is a hearing that happens in federal court when someone has been, logically enough, released on supervised release and they have committed a new offense and are brought back in. That it may be an offense that is relatively serious, or it may be simply that they were, for example, staying in a halfway house and they violated curfew. Or it could be that they tested positive for the use of some sort of drugs that they were not supposed to be using. Those are the technical sorts of violations that happen very often when you're on supervised release. So this is a supervised release hearing. So listen carefully. Let's try to all figure out who the participants are and what happened. Now, this is a fairly long hearing. I'm only going to play about 5 minutes of it. Now, 5 minutes of active listening is a lot. There's going to be a lot of information. So again, please do not write anything down. And when after 5 minutes, I will stop this and I will ask you what is going on, who the players are, basically to summarize everything that you heard. Okay?
Okay.
All right, here goes. All rise.
Good morning, everyone. Be seated. We're here in the matter of United States of America versus Jose Perez. May I have your appearances, everyone?
Good morning, Your Honor. Joel Abrams, present for the United States. Good morning, Your Honor. Maria Seitz from the Federal Public Defender's Office on behalf of Mr. Jose Perez.
Good morning. Did you have a chance to discuss the report with your client?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe Mr. Perez is prepared to admit to the violation at this time.
Good morning.
Your Honor, government's view is that this is a very bad sign. Given Mr. Perez's criminal history, the crime of conviction, this is not a good way to start and or end his supervision. In my discussions with probation, we've agreed to recommend 8 months in the custody of the Bureau of Prisons, a period of supervised release with special conditions, which we can discuss, such as location monitoring, participation in anger management, and mental health treatment. If you like, I can be heard further on why we believe this.
Well, let me hear from Mr. Perez first. The big issue I have is that Mr. Perez doesn't seem to take to supervised release and the requirements of supervised release seriously. It strikes me as, regardless of what probation does, it's not going to help him. He's not going to cooperate. It's going to be a continuation of the problems we have had since he has been on supervised release, and he probably had in prison. I'm not sure it's worth the time and effort of probation to keep him on supervised release.
Your Honor, I would respectfully take the opposite view that, given all the factors you just said, that is the reason to keep him under the government's thumb as long as possible.
I understand that. That's usually my approach. Oftentimes, probation recommends termination, and I say no. That's rewarding him for bad behavior. But this, I think, is a little bit of an exception. Let me hear from the public defender.
Your Honor, we would agree with the court and request termination in this case for a variety of reasons. The resources of probation and the halfway houses are limited. Quite candidly, those resources should be spent on someone who wants to avail themselves of those resources and wants to use what's out there in those settings. Realistically, Jose Perez is not one of those, while he has done well in certain regards.
Which regards are those? I would love to see something positive. I don't see anything positive.
2 things that I want to emphasize for the court. He has been going to his treatment. I spoke with a facility myself. Since he was ordered into the treatment center, the only class that he has missed is one when he was in my office meeting with me. He, according to the report, has been testing negative and has been reporting for those drug tests.
Well, wait. Let me stop you here for a second. If, in fact, he's been helped by the treatment center, then that speaks in favor of keeping him on supervised release.
Well, Your Honor, I think what this shows is that Mr. Perez is understanding of his personal limitations. I think he knows that he needs the therapy the center can give him. And I think that's what he's been trying to do for himself. I think that, as the court stated, and is my conversations with probation, the halfway house setting is not working for Mr. Perez. I think he recognizes that, and I think, in this case in particular, it causes more problems than good. I think the fact that Mr. Perez has been going to the treatment facility shows that it is something that is important to him and something he will continue to do absent supervision.
No. Wait. So he's going to go through the treatment program without supervision?
My understanding, Your Honor, perhaps I'm wrong, was that...
Let me speak to the judge.
Give me a second. Was that there are services for people. I know that I've spoken to clients in the past that have done that. Maybe I misunderstood what he was telling me.
Why isn't supervision better than not having any supervision? With the support, guidance, keeping him on the right track if, in fact, he's sincere about his attempts.
So, how did we do?
I think okay.
Yeah? All right, let's hear it. What is this about?
Supervised release. Not complying with probation.
Okay, but who are the players and what is happening?
The judge, the public defender, the district attorney, and the defendant. We spoke for a little bit.
Okay, can anybody add anything to what Elena just summarized?
The defendant was being, the public defender was saying that supervised, what is the supervised provision would not work because the defendant is voluntarily gone to have himself checked without any supervision.
Okay, so Rogelio, it's your position that the public defender was arguing for or against termination of the supervised release?
He was arguing for the termination of the release.
Yes, okay, very good. So what else was going on in this case? Ophelia, anything to add?
Okay, he was doing well in that he was going to his drug treatment. He was being tested for the drugs, and he was also going for the treatment he needed. However, he had problems with dealing with the halfway house and having that supervised release. On the other hand, the attorney was saying that he needed that supervision, that he wouldn't do it if he didn't have the supervision.
Which attorney was saying that?
The government.
The government was saying that, right? Okay. So
that it was working because he was in that situation.
Okay. So do you guys know what an elevator pitch is? Have you ever heard that term?
No, I haven't.
An elevator pitch is basically the idea of trying to sell something to someone in the amount of time that it takes an elevator to get from the ground floor to the top of a New York building. So these days elevators are very fast and you probably get up in 30 seconds, so it's a very, very short pitch. Traditionally, it used to be a couple of minutes that you would run into somebody in an elevator and you would say, oh my gosh, this is this person who can hire me, give me a job, whatever. I've got 2 minutes while I'm standing in the elevator with this person to convince this person to hire me, okay? So the elevator pitch has sort of evolved into what we understand of being a really quick and dirty summary of what is happening. So we try to give an elevator pitch summary of what is going on in this hearing. Now, obviously, I have the benefit of having heard this before, but I would say something like, this is a supervised release hearing. All of the parties are present. In a supervised release hearing, the judge notes that normally probation would be arguing against termination, and that normally the court would also be in favor of not terminating somebody's supervised release because it's a way of rewarding someone's poor behavior. But in this particular case, it sounds like the tables are turned because the prosecution is arguing not to terminate, and the public defender, who normally would be asking for termination, is asking for them not to be terminated, is now asking for them to be terminated. In any case, it does sound like this defendant, Mr. Perez, has a whole lot of issues and has been in and out of a halfway house and has been having an awful lot of difficulty, and it sounds like the court is in quite the conundrum. That would be my elevator pitch and my summary of that case. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so when we're talking about reformulation, that's, or summarizing something, it's an extreme summary of the events of what is going on. All right? Let's try another one. This one is much more complicated, so I'm gonna let you take notes. Okay?
Okay.
All right. But notes, you're not trying to take consecutive, you're taking notes so that you can reformulate and explain this in your own words. Okay?
Thank you. Now, with respect to the matter before the court, Dr. Robinson, I understand that on October the 19th, you performed an autopsy on the body of an individual identified as Robert Taylor.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what observations you made during the autopsy on Mr. Taylor's body?
Mr. Taylor had sustained a number of gunshot wounds. He had sustained one wound which passed through his left hand, entering the back of the left hand, exiting the palmar surface of the left hand, and then entering the left side of his chest, passing across towards the right side.
Could you perhaps get up and demonstrate the areas of the left hand and of the chest where you noticed the injuries which caused you to give the evidence you did concerning this particular gunshot wound?
I would like to refer to my notes. I have pencil sketches made at the time of the examination and a type report dictated during the course of the examination.
Yes, you may refer to them, Doctor.
The gunshot wound that I've referred to entered the back of the hand, exited here on the palmar surface of the hand, entered the chest on the left side up at the top.
All right.
The bullet then passed in a left to right direction and towards the back and came to rest in the back of the body underneath the shoulder blade.
All right. So you would have observed 4 injuries. 1 to the back of the hand, 1 to the palm of the hand, 1 to the upper chest, and 1 behind the back under the right arm?
There was no exit from this wound and the bullet was recovered.
All right. And what exactly did you actually recover?
I recovered a deformed white metal projectile from behind the right shoulder blade. I also recovered a separate copper jacket that I found inside the right chest.
It's my understanding you turned over anything that you discovered, particularly foreign material in Mr. Taylor's body, to Constable Sanders of the RCMP.
That's correct.
All right.
The second gunshot wound was a wound which passed through the left forearm, entering this portion of the left forearm, exiting the left forearm, entering this side of the chest, passing across the chest, again left of the body to the right. This one exited the right side of the chest towards the back, so there was no projectile recovered from this wound.
Can you tell us about the 2 gunshots you've described so far as they pass through the torso, not the various parts of the hand? You've indicated pass through the body from left to right. Can you tell us the level of the trajectory in terms of whether it was level, whether it was downward, upward, or what can you tell us in that respect?
The level of the wound I've just described, that's the one that exits through the torso, is essentially left to right on the horizontal. And the one that I described before that, the portion that goes through the torso, again, left to right, essentially on the horizontal. It's not going up or down in any measurable way.
All right. And can you tell us any other finding that you made?
There was a third gunshot wound that passed through the chest. The entrance was in the back of the chest wall. The exit wound was in the front, and the bullet had passed straight through, back to front. A little bit downwards, not enough to measure, and a little bit towards the left.
Who would like to give us the elevator pitch on that one?
Okay, there were 3 bullets. This was a report made by Dr. Robinson to add a autopsy for Robert Taylor. There was a gunshot wound. There were 3 bullets. The first bullet coming in from the left hand and went chest out on a left to right direction, but there was no exit and no, the only thing that was recovered was the bullet in the right shoulder blade and the right chest. The second bullet was came in from the left forearm, exited in the torso on a left to right horizontal plane. And the third bullet was from the chest, and exited from that's how, as far as I went.
That's as far as you got. Okay. Does anybody have anything different or anything additional? No?
No.
Okay. So what are the core takeaways from what was going on here?
I wrote that it was an autopsy report by Dr. Robinson, and that there were several gunshot wounds, 3 of them, to the hand, to the forearm, to the chest, and pretty much everything they said before.
Okay.
So it was exactly the same thing.
So I had not actually listened to the whole audio before, so I was doing this with you guys. I did this on purpose. Okay, I knew what it was about. I knew that it was an autopsy. I knew that she was there was a doctor testifying to the autopsy on the witness stand, but I had not listened to the whole thing other than listen to the first few words. That was it. Okay. My takeaway, first of all, is that this is a physician testifying on the stand about an autopsy that she performed and a report that she prepared. Okay, so that's the first thing. It may seem obvious, but we need to set the proper stage. For the most part, I had pretty much similar information to share as well, the same things that you guys said. I did, however, note that she said that there were 4 injuries. I didn't notice that there were necessarily 3 bullets. I noticed that there were 4 injuries to the body. I also took note of some of the specifics with regard to the bullet. So what was recovered was a white projectile, and that separately that she had recovered a copper jacket. That I noted the direction that the bullets appeared to primarily, whether going right, they were going left to right, but they were also horizontal, and that the second projectile that I noted was one that had actually gone from back to front. So one appeared to be going forward through the hand and into the chest, and the other would appear to have been shot fired from the rear. So that would be my reformulation of my summary of what I heard. Did you guys hear that, or am I making it up?
No, that's correct.
Okay. All right.
That was perfect.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. All right. So again, and my notes, let me just show you that I did not write it all down. These are my notes, my scribbles. Okay. All right. This takes practice, guys. It's a technique, it's a skill, just like what we were doing last time. It sounds silly, writing down the alphabet while you're listening. Reformulation, summarizing things takes practice. And this is fortunately something that you can do easily. You can listen to something on the news, turn it off, and try to remember everything that was said. Trying to pick out the core concepts. The more you do it, the easier it will get, and the more you listen to court recordings or even just reading through court transcripts, you'll be able to call out the key information. That's the sort of thing that you won't want to miss when you're interpreting, okay? So now that we've heard a little bit of that first autopsy and we know what it's all about, I'm going to ask you to take out your recording devices, and we're going to go through the entire autopsy report, but this time you guys are going to interpret it into your target language. Trying to keep a certain level of décalage, watching your delivery, and trying to, if necessary, reformulate if you miss something or if you need to put something in other words because you either don't know exactly what it means, you don't have the terminology. If something comes up and you just are at a complete blank, just repeat it in English, okay? We're not trying to be perfect. The idea is to practice the skill of speaking and listening, a little reformulation, watching our delivery, listening to ourselves as we go, okay? This is the kind of thing you've got to practice at home. You don't want to practice this at work because you'll just completely mess yourself up. So that's why we're here, and that's what the purpose of this whole thing is to practice and to mess up now so that we do it perfectly in court, okay? So not looking for perfection, looking for quick and dirty, all right?
All right.
Okay. Let me put this back to the beginning.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the matter before the court, Dr. Robinson, I understand that on October the 19th, you performed an autopsy on the body of an individual identified as Robert Taylor.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what observations you made during the autopsy on Mr. Taylor's body?
Mr. Taylor had sustained a number of gunshot wounds. He had sustained one wound which passed through his left hand, entering the back of the left hand, exiting the palmar surface of the left hand, and then entering the left side of his chest, passing across towards the right side.
Could you perhaps get up and demonstrate the areas of the left hand and of the chest where you noticed the injuries which caused you to give the evidence you did concerning this particular gunshot wound?
I would like to refer to my notes. I have pencil sketches made at the time of the examination and a type report dictated during the course of the examination.
Yes, you may refer to them, Doctor.
The gunshot wound that I've referred to entered the back of the hand, exited here on the palmar surface of the hand, entered the chest on the left side up at the top.
All right.
The bullet then passed in a left-to-right direction and towards the back and came to rest in the back of the body underneath the shoulder blade.
All right. So you would have observed 4 injuries. 1 to the back of the hand, 1 to the palm of the hand, 1 to the upper chest, and 1 behind the back under the right arm?
There was no exit from this wound and the bullet was recovered.
All right. And what exactly did you actually recover?
I recovered a deformed white metal projectile from behind the right shoulder blade. I also recovered a separate copper jacket that I found inside the right chest.
It's my understanding you turned over anything that you discovered, particularly foreign material in Mr. Taylor's body, to Constable Sanders of the RCMP.
That's correct.
All right.
The second gunshot wound was a wound which passed through the left forearm, entering this portion of the left forearm, exiting the left forearm, entering this side of the chest, passing across the chest, again left of the body to the right. This one exited the right side of the chest towards the back, so there was no projectile recovered from this wound.
Can you tell us about the 2 gunshots you've described so far as they passed through the torso, not the various parts of the hand? You've indicated pass through the body from left to right. Can you tell us the level of the trajectory in terms of whether it was level, whether it was downward, upward, or what can you tell us in that respect?
The level of the wound I've just described, that's the one that exits through the torso, is essentially left to right on the horizontal. And the one that I described before that, the portion that goes through the torso, again, left to right, essentially on the horizontal. It's not going up or down in any measurable way.
All right. And can you tell us any other finding that you made?
There was a 3rd gunshot wound that passed through the chest. The entrance was in the back of the chest wall. The exit wound was in the front, and the bullet had passed straight through, back to front. A little bit downwards, not enough to measure, and a little bit towards the left.
All right. As a result of your observations and things you've told us about, were you able in this case to determine a cause of death?
The cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds.
What can you tell us based on the various wounds and the trajectory of the body? Would you tell us, in your opinion, the mechanism by which Mr. Taylor died, in the sense of what internal injuries he suffered, and how the various shots you described caused his death?
The wounds that passed through the chest broke ribs, damaged lungs, and more importantly, shredded a 2-inch portion of the aorta. The aorta is the main artery in the body. It runs from the heart and delivers blood to the rest of the body. Either of those 2 wounds in their own right, and certainly both together, would have produced very rapid death. The 3rd gunshot wound, the one that passed through the chest, actually passed through and disrupted the heart. So that wound in itself had the potential of causing fairly immediate death. However, the characteristics of the wound on appearance were somewhat different from the other 2. The typical changes, the vital reaction that we see in the skin, particularly surrounding an entrance wound when a person is alive and with an intact circulation, were not present with this wound. So this wound had the characteristics of having been sustained either around the time of death, that is, during the dying process, or after death.
All right. I take it from your evidence is that whatever the order of the first 2 shots you describe, the ones that passed through the torso, in your opinion, the shot that went through the back and through the heart was 3rd in order in time.
Correct. That is my opinion.
All right. Now, in terms of sequencing, You've told us why you thought the shot to the back was third in order of time. Was it possible, from examining Mr. Taylor's body, to determine the order of the first two shots?
No. Either of the first two shots could have come first. The only thing that I can say about the first two shots, because they both shredded this large artery, the aorta, they had to have been sustained fairly quickly in terms of their time relationship to each other. The minute that aorta was shredded, by the first shot, Mr. Taylor was dying. He had effectively around 9 to 11 seconds in which he could have still functioned or stayed upright. That's the time it takes to utilize the oxygen that's already in the brain. Because the aorta is shredded, no circulation is now going to reach his brain. So no additional oxygen is going to be supplied to the brain to function. Given the fact that the trajectories are so close to each other, almost parallel as they go through the body, the shots had to be sustained in very rapid succession. The evidence suggests that with the passing through the same organs and shredding the same portion of the aorta, Mr. Taylor was still in the same position when he sustained the second shot as he was when he sustained the first shot.
Okay. How did we do with that?
It was challenging, as but you know, having to focus a lot on imagining what was going on eventually became better.
So some of the terminology you may or may not be familiar with. If you do a lot of these kinds of things in court, but you probably were familiar with all of the terminology. I think the pace was reasonable. It was not particularly fast-paced. There weren't any issues with the really with speed or again with accent. Pablo says he got like 90%, and when the doctor commented on the two shots being almost simultaneous, that obviously was something that came up later that wouldn't have been in the elevator pitch because we hadn't heard it. Okay, it is important. Okay, it is important. So, knowing what we now know, would anybody else like to add to the elevator pitch or to supplement, just to describe what else happened in this case or what you imagine happened in this case? For example, how it came to be that this individual had this wound that was going from back to front. What did we learn about that wound in the second part that we were doing the interpreting? How closely were you listening to the original is what I'm asking you.
The two gunshot wounds were one right after another, that it shattered the aorta, yeah, and that he was in the same position when he received the two gunshot wounds that were fatal.
Right, but what does that mean? Because if he was probably standing when he received one shot that went through the hand and into the chest, right?
Right.
And there are those two shots that basically have that similar trajectory, and then all of a sudden there's the shot that goes from the back to the front. What do you guys think happened?
He bent forward.
He was falling down.
Right, he fell down. Why did he fall down? What did the doctor say?
That it shattered the aorta.
And that meant what? Huh?
He was dying.
He was dying, and what else?
And the blood was not going to the brain.
Right.
And what else?
The aorta was smashed and was so therefore that aorta was responsible for the oxygen that's supposed to go to the brain.
Right. Pablo said no oxygen was going to his brain, but what the doctor said was that For 9 to 11 seconds, he could remain what?
Alive.
Upright. Yes, Pablo, upright. That he could remain upright. Yes, I got it. I got the sign language. Okay? He's going like this. It's like, okay, upright.
Right.
Okay? So he could remain upright, which means that what happened? He fell down. So I would imagine that that third gunshot went from back to front. He's standing there facing his attacker. The attacker's shooting him. 2 gunshots go off. Goes through the aorta, shatters it completely. It comes to a few seconds later, he falls to the ground. Boom! They give him the third shot, goes from back to front. Did nobody else assume that? Visualization, people. Visualization. Okay.
Right.
Yes, Pablo, I've been to too many movies. Yes, that is entirely possible. Either I've been to the movies too often or I've been in too many courtrooms. I'm going to assume that it's actually the latter because I'm not really that big of a movie freak. And yes, I do have an overactive imagination, but not that overactive. It wasn't that hard to figure out. That's probably what happened. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to do some more reformulations, but we're going to switch it up a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay. So this time around, you're going to interpret the same speech that you're going to hear, which is a proffer, and you guys can pick. You can do whatever you want with this. You can take the register and completely destroy it and turn it into street talk. You can turn it into some sort of aristocratic, as it says on screen, drawl. You can do it in Southern, you can do it in Northern, you can do it in Valley, you can do whatever you want. You're going to listen to this, you're going to shadow it, and you're going to make changes. So you're going to change it, you're going to completely mix it up and do something totally different with it. Okay, so if it's very formal, you're going to make it extremely informal. If it's very informal, you're going to make it very formal. You're going to make it Southern. You're going to do something with what you're hearing that requires you to think, to reformulate what is being said. Understood? All right.
Do we record this?
Pardon? Yes, please record it. This is for you guys so that you can have it for later and you can go back and listen to your performance and compare and see what it sounds like to you. Okay? When you go back to listen to it later as homework, again, you're going to listen for your delivery, for the speech, for the speed, for the way it sounds, the ums, the uhs, the ers. Okay? We're continuing to think about all of those things as we work through this. All right? Okay. Whoops, I wasn't supposed to share this. This is for me to read to you guys. All right. Here we go. Beginning in or around at least April 2012 and continuing until in or around at least June 2015, in Miami-Dade County in the Southern District of Florida, Eliana Calvo, the defendant, knowingly and willfully conspired and agreed with others to commit healthcare fraud in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1349. Medicare is a healthcare benefit program of the United States, as defined in Title 18 United States Code Section 24. Furthermore, Medicare is a healthcare benefit program affecting commerce. Vivi Pharmacy was a Florida corporation that did business as a pharmacy and purportedly provided prescription drugs to Medicare beneficiaries, among others. Likewise, Osham Pharmacy Discount, Inc. was a Florida corporation that did business as a pharmacy and purportedly provided prescription drugs to Medicare beneficiaries, among others. During the entirety of the relevant time period, the defendant and her co-conspirators agreed to and actually did operate the Vivi Pharmacy and Oshun Pharmacy for the purpose of submitting and causing the submission of false and fraudulent claims to the Medicare program and diverting fraud proceeds for their personal use, the use and benefit of others, and to further the fraud. First question, could you keep up with that? Second question, what accents did you choose? How did you decide to handle that?
Hispanic accent.
Hispanic accent, okay. That sounds like fun. Sorry, I missed that. So we had a Hispanic accent. Who did something else? Xiaoling, are you with us?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to set up my laptop.
No problem. Were you able to do the exercise?
Yes.
Okay,
A
and
little bit.
what did you do with it?
I listened to it.
Okay, all right, perfect, no problem. Pablo, what did you do with it? Tried to make it more casual. Okay, can you give us some examples of how you can make that more casual? I'd love to hear some of your suggestions for casualizing a Medicare proffer. All right. While you're working on that, Rogelio, wait, so who hasn't told us what they did? Ofelia?
I did what you call a cubiche, and I used a little bit of Spanglish.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
A real heavy middle-class Cuban accent.
Beautiful. Love it. Excellent. That's great.
Tú sabes, algo así como lo que estoy diciendo, ¿verdad?
No, absolutely.
I had fun.
On diario in my old courthouse. What? I'm hearing myself, so maybe Pablo's got himself connected?
Yes.
Yes, Xiaoling.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Somebody else is connected.
Yeah.
All right, I'm
no,
waiting on.
That's me.
Oh, that was you? Okay. All right, Pablo's working on something, doing some sort of engineering over there. Nope, we're engineering and we're giving up the engineering and we're going back to interpreting as a profession. Yeah, you know, okay. I do understand. I do. Okay. The next one that I'm going to read for you is from a sentencing hearing. And what you're going to do with this one is add as many redundancies as possible. Okay? So we're going to try to repeat things, add things in. Obviously, as interpreters, we're not supposed to have any additions or omissions. But for the purposes of these exercises, I want you to try to come up with as many synonyms for as many words as you can, the things that I'm going to say. Obviously, I'm going to go through this more slowly because the idea is that you should have time to come up with these redundancies. So if I say a noun or a verb, I want you to give as many verbs or nouns as you possibly can. Okay, in English.
In English. Okay.
In English. We're not trying to interpret this. We're just trying to come up with as many redundancies, as many words as we can for all the substantive things I'm going to say, primarily verbs and nouns. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Again, before we get started, this is a sentencing colloquy.
It's colloquy.
Okay?
Hearing.
Okay, so let's make sure our microphones are off or muted. Okay, here we go. Calling case 157989. Counsel, state your appearances for the record. Your Honor, good afternoon. Joel Abrams from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Good afternoon, Judge. Maria Seitz on behalf of the defendant, Josefina Suarez. Before we begin, counsel, do you have any objections to the pre-sentencing investigative report, or PSI? No, Your Honor. Very well then. Before going further, I would ask counsel to review with me the major calculations in the advisory pre-sentence investigation report. The offense level is 24. The criminal history category is Roman numeral 1. The advisory guideline range is 51 to 63 months imprisonment, 2 to 5 years supervised release, a fine, and $100 special assessment. Is that correct in its totality? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Suarez, you were in court today to receive your sentence. Before that happens, I must ask your attorney if there's any legal cause as to why the sentence of the law should not be pronounced upon you. No, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Suarez, have you read the advisory pre-sentence investigation report, and have you and your attorney discussed the advisory pre-sentence investigation report? Yes, Your Honor. He explained everything to me. Judge, I just want to apologize very sincerely to you, to the government, and most especially to my family. There is no excuse for what I did. I was lured into this criminal enterprise, betrayed, really, by my now ex-husband. I knew that what he was asking me to do was wrong, but I didn't want to anger him. As you know, I am a victim of domestic violence, both psychological and physical. I was afraid of him, so I agreed to deliver the drugs. I know I shouldn't have, but I was scared. That was the first time. The second time, I'll admit, was easier. I wasn't as nervous about what I was doing, although I was still afraid of what would happen if I refused. I guess I should have been more nervous, because that's when I was arrested. The second time. I am not a career criminal, Your Honor. I am a stay-at-home mom and a full-time caregiver to my 11-year-old son who has Down's syndrome. I cope as best as I can with his special needs. I do everything his teachers and doctors ask. I have no other family in the area, Your Honor, so my son depends 100% on me. Since his arrest, my ex-husband stopped giving me any money. Fortunately, my brother has taken up the slack and is helping us out. I have even managed to get a job a few hours a week. Well, at least I had a job. That was before my bond was revoked and I went to prison. Your Honor, being away in jail, away from my son, worrying about him constantly, knowing that he is suffering in the foster home he's been placed in, it's eating me up. I made the mistake. I committed the crime. If you decide to keep me in jail, Your Honor, I will be able to deal with it. But it won't be easy. I know that what I did was wrong, and I deserve to be punished for it. But my son has done nothing wrong. He is completely innocent, and yet I can't help but feel that he is being punished too. He doesn't have the ability to understand what his mom did or why she has been taken from him. It's terribly hard on him. Given the chance, Your Honor, I swear that you will never see me in a court of law again. Not ever. Not even for a speeding ticket. Never, ever. I beg you for your mercy, Your Honor. Thank you. Okay? How did that go? Were there words that you couldn't think of a synonym for on the fly while you were still listening? Did you stop in the middle because you were trying to think of synonyms and then forget what was happening and lag behind?
That was pretty much the case. I tried to inject some words there, but I had to keep up with where it was going to go next, so I didn't have much time to actually add synonyms as much as I should.
Okay. Was that the general experience?
Yes.
Okay. The whole purpose of this exercise is, again, to keep you thinking about two things at the same time. You're thinking about what you're hearing, you're thinking about repeating, but you're also trying to keep the other side of your brain active to keep on thinking about other things. So the practice point here for the simultaneous is doing, again, two things at once. These are the types of exercises that you guys can do at home that will help you keep up your simultaneous and not get bored just doing simultaneous and feeling like you're not getting anywhere. If you remember at the very beginning on Thursday, we were talking, I mentioned that madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If you're sitting at home and you're practicing your simultaneous and you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, then you probably need to mix it up and do some other things to get your brain activated to be used to doing more than one thing at the same time. So the décalage, the split attention, the reformulation, and these kinds of word games of trying to think about synonyms is precisely to keep your mind focused on the one hand on what's being said and let the other side of the brain be distracted and try to do something else at the same time. Again, as we saw last time, it's harder to do when you're going from words to words than it is, for example, when we were trying to listen to words and write down numbers. Because words to numbers tends to be easier because they're slightly different sides of the brain, slightly different activities. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good.
Yes.
So, yeah, Pablo said he had difficulty thinking of redundant terms or synonyms to add to the text. Okay? I will actually post a recording of this and the, let me write it down, and the transcript. So you guys can practice either repeating things or actually interpreting it as you prefer, so that you'll have that as a resource on the Dropbox. Let me just write it down. Okay. So again, I will post all these materials on the Dropbox so that you guys can have access to them and download them and make use of them. Would you like me to put up additional transcripts and court documents? Would that be helpful for you in your studies, in your reviews, or do you prefer that I just put up? Yeah, sure.
I would love it. I would love it.
Okay. All the materials I have are from federal court, so they may not be applicable to state courts, but if you are a Spanish speaker and you're looking at taking the federal exam, or if you're like Xiaoling, who's working in a language that she may be called into federal court for, that may be helpful. So I'll post some additional materials on there about federal courts and introductions. Actually, I think I actually did put up already There's some great materials out of California that describe the different types of hearings in federal court, what the proceedings are like in that district, and that contain a lot of terminology that's very specific to federal court proceedings. So those are also a fabulous resource if you're, again, looking at the federal exam, or if you're working in a language in which you might be called into federal court and you don't want to be caught unprepared for that experience. Okay. All right. Rogelio will not be with us on Thursday, so he's going to go ahead and give us a 5-minute presentation. I'd like everybody to take notes. Please take notes on terminology, on concepts on one side of the page, and on the other side of the page, you're going to write down all of the delivery issues that Rogelio has. If it's an if it's an if his voice tends to go up at the end of the sentence, the voice goes down too far at the end of the sentence. Whatever it is, we're going to take notes of it. Again, folks, this is constructive criticism. We know that the way we speak tends to be the way, yes, exactly, Father. No, we're not trying to beat anybody up. We do know that the way we speak often, off the cuff, often reflects the way that we're going to interpret. So if we have bad habits in our daily speech, we may also have those nasty habits when we interpret. So without further ado, Rogelio, the floor is yours.
Good evening. The topic I will be sharing tonight will be about the music in the Philippines. As perhaps with every country, music is categorized as either modern or traditional. And in the Philippines, the modern music was influenced by American colonizers for 50 years. And it eventually became what was known in the 70s because of the influence of American culture and music. It became known as the original Filipino music, which had in its diverse form from disco to rock and roll to music that was an infusion of the West. The traditional part of Philippine music owes its existence to the Spanish culture, which was actually lasted for about 300 years. It had the same kind of melodic pattern and delivery as a Spanish music would have. And these are called either the kundiman or the harana. The kundiman is sort of like a song that has a guitar accompaniment and is typically a love song. The harana is a type of song that is considered to be a song that is given as, is presented as a courting song during the time in areas of the Philippines where after the rice season, the young at heart would actually spend the night singing, and that would have the flavor reminiscent of Spanish kind of emotions. So in the Philippines today, the kind of music that one would hear, the modern type, has evolved into a lot more global appeal, having because of this new wave of social media. We also have now forms of music that are more like the United States in rap music or hip hop music, but done in Filipino language. So that would be the way Philippine music would be at this point in time, and that's I can only think of how other countries have evolved in the same way as the Philippines has evolved, simply because of how the country was influenced by another country because of its way of how modern the country that colonized the Philippines was. And that's, in a nutshell, Philippine music. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for also for being the first one. You did a great job. That was not a full 5 minutes, so
I know.
That's fine. That was it. The point. Obviously, however, you prepared something, and what you had prepared, you got through all of your material and ran out of things to say, right?
Yes. I was having second thoughts whether I should stop, but I was also trying to be aware of the time, and I realized I was not going to get to 5 minutes.
Right, which is why in the last minute you had 5 uhs, whereas in the previous period you had I counted a total of 15. There were 10 in the first portion. They were interspersed. They were not a distraction. They were natural. They were perfectly acceptable uhs. Right. As soon as you sort of got lost and finished your material, bam, there were 5 uhs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me just quickly go through a couple of things that I really liked about what you did. I love the content. It was innovative. It was different. It was something I knew nothing about. So thank you. I've learned something this evening. I loved your enunciation. I loved the way that you rounded out all of your words. You have a very pleasant voice. It was very easy to listen to. I liked your vocabulary. It was very broad. It felt enriching. It felt that it was in consonance with the topic that you were discussing. You were speaking about rather erudite topic of music, and the terminology that you chose, the turns of phrase really brought those musical styles to life for me. So I really enjoyed that, and it was a pleasure to listen to.
Thank you.
One negative, just one little thing. Sometimes the delivery sounded a little stilted, like you were having trouble sort of figuring out where to go next.
Yes.
Okay. So that is something that you probably need to be aware of while you're interpreting, because we do tend to do that as well. As you're waiting for the input, you start to think about what the speaker is going to say next, right?
Right.
So if you tend to do it in your natural speech, you want to be careful with that when you're interpreting. But I loved it.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments for Rogelio?
No, I think it was great. I just have a question. When you mentioned about the jarana, that was did you say that was a courting song?
Yes.
That was the Hispanic. The Hispanic type of song. But that's no longer. They don't use it as much anymore, right? They don't sing it as much anymore.
It's only sung in very remote areas where the custom is still being practiced.
Oh, okay. But everybody's going into the modern songs in the big cities, just like big countries.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. That was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pablo noted in the chat also that it's not easy to do a presentation like that in a language that's not your native language, and that you've done a very good job with it as well, and I agree.
It would have helped if I had actually notes and had something to follow, but given that it is, in interpreting, there's always that unexpected, waiting, and then, as you said, prolonging, and then there's that, I suppose.
But the other question I had for you was, and it's a language thing, jarana, to me, in Spanish, in my Spanish, is a party. And I thought it was kind of odd that you said that it was sort of like what you would hear courting someone. And
Yes.
I'm thinking, harana, I thought you were going to say, woohoo, this is like, party music.
No.
And
Oh.
a harana is to go out to have a good time, to party.
Is
Pablo,
that
do you have a better description of what harana should mean?
is really a Spanish word?
It is, yeah, party time, fiesta. It is a Spanish word. We use it in Chile. Obviously, Pablo knows it as well. I don't know if people use it in other places.
Yes.
Chile tends
Yes,
to be very.
we use it in Mexico too.
Okay, and with the same
in Cuba also.
Okay, so there you go.
Oh, so it is. But in our country, harana means when you go up to court somebody and you're going to sing, and that's what it is used for. Yes. Oh, interesting.
Mm.
Very interesting. Yeah, fiesta, party time, pachanga, serenata, parranda. Yep. Okay. So I just thought that was interesting on that particular note. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Rogelio. Again, you did a fabulous job on that. And it's also not easy to go first. Now, I have bad news for the rest of you. Pablo has to go. It's being recorded, Pablo, so you don't get out of it. You have to leave. The bad news for the rest of you is that Rogelio, since he was going first and was volunteering, does not have to go through this. But the rest of you, for all of the presentations that you make, in addition to providing feedback, you'll all have to perform one of the exercises that we've done. So you'll have to summarize. You'll have to reformulate, okay? You'll have to repeat as much as you can using as many synonyms as you can. So you'll all have an opportunity to practice these different techniques as people are speaking. So you'll pick one, you'll do it. Now, you don't have to do it publicly. You can record it for yourselves, but I do want you to practice doing these things in addition to providing feedback on delivery to your classmates. Okay, so you'll have a double task. You'll be listening, the rest of you will be listening for the delivery and for the content, and you will pick a task and you will do it.
Oh.
Okay?
All right.
That was a surprise that I had for you for Thursday.
As the people are speaking?
Yes, you can do it while they're speaking. If you're going to be reformed, yes, you can do it while they're speaking. So if you choose, for example, to repeat everything and add in as many synonyms as you can, then you'll obviously do that while they're speaking. If you choose to reformulate, I'll give you a minute or so afterwards to do an elevator pitch. And if you want to volunteer to do the elevator pitch after somebody has finished their presentation, we're all open to having you do that for the entire class. I won't force you, but you're welcome to do it, and I think it would be very helpful, and you get practice doing the elevator pitch as well.
Okay.
All right. So you'll have to, and the idea will be, for example, if Ophelia is presenting, then Elena, you do the elevator pitch. And then when Pablo is presenting, Ophelia does the elevator pitch, and so on and so forth. So you're not practicing the same technique for every presentation. You want to practice different techniques with each presentation.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Okay. Good. Excellent. So we've got 3 minutes left. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, things that I need to go over, to not go over?
I have a question,
Yes.
Kati. Because I'm not familiar with the Dropbox, it's okay to be sending these recordings through email?
Yeah, that's fine. Just go ahead and send them to me. Your case is special. And also, Pablo, I'll need you to do the exercises from last Thursday and either put them in a Dropbox and send the link to me, or just send me those recordings so that I can make sure that you're doing the exercises, that you watch the class to make sure that you get the continuing education credits that you need for the class. Okay. So yeah, that's the case of if you're not actually going to be here. Everyone else obviously was here and participated, so there's no issue there. Okay.
Yes, Katya.
Yes, Charlene.
How much time a day do you think we should be practicing? At least how much time we should be practicing for the simultaneous interpreting?
That is a really loaded question because in part it depends on how much experience you have. The more experience you have, the more you can take. The less experience you have, the harder it is, and therefore you don't want to stress yourself as much. If you are just really starting out in the conference mode in simultaneous, you probably want to do 10 or 15 minutes at a time, no more than that, of actual practice. Take a break, come back, do the same segment again. You're going to want to do those segments time and time and time again. Doesn't matter that you've heard it before. You want to go over it and over it until you feel comfortable with what you are saying. And do that for no more than an hour a day. If you are more experienced, you might want to take 20 minutes straight through and only do it once. Or half an hour and go through it and only do it once. Or take a 15-minute segment and do it twice. So it really depends on how experienced you are and how much time you have available. You may have to just, as you're driving to work in the morning, try to do and follow along with the news, understanding that, of course, you are also paying attention to driving. Please don't stop paying attention to red lights because you're practicing your simultaneous. It is a great exercise in terms of split attention, but I don't actually recommend it for that purpose. It could be a little too dangerous. So you could be doing something else, but trying to continue to interpret. So it'll depend on experience and the time that you have available. I certainly would not suggest doing it for more than an hour and a half a day.
Okay. If you don't have much time, do you think instead of starting with shadowing, all the other stuff, can you go straight into just doing simultaneous interpreting?
The shadowing the shadowing and the other exercises will help build your skills, but there's nothing like actually interpreting to develop the skills. There are a couple of skills. We talked about fight or flight last time, and that fight or flight instinct really comes into play when you're interpreting, when you have that extra cognitive load of trying to code switch from one language into another. And in your case, that code switching is probably more intensive than it is for those of us that work in Western languages, because you've got all kinds of acculturation and other things that are going on that you have to do that we may not have to do as intensively. So shadowing is great. It'll keep up your skill. You get used to listening and speaking at the same time, and doing more than one thing at the same time. But the actual act of interpreting, of making that switch from one language to the other, and that instinct of, oh my goodness, there's a word I don't understand. Now what do I do? Now what do I do? Oh no, oh no. And while you're saying, oh no, you've missed the entire next sentence. Getting past that can only happen when you're practicing going from one language into another. Okay, take care.
Thank you so much.
All right, see y'all on Thursday.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.